and they're going to fight me. Like this slob of a governor you have in Illinois, this poor guy got thrown out of his business by his family. I know the family. I was partners with the family. Nice family. I like the family, but he was no good. They threw him out. He's governor of Illinois, and he goes about Trump, we don't need his help. Chicago is the worst. These places are really bad. Crime in D.C. was the worst it ever was. You know, they make up stories. Crime in D.C. was the worst ever in history. And now, over the last 13 days, we've worked so hard, and we've taken so many, there are many left, but we've taken so many criminals, over 1,000. I watched a man from Maryland who said to me, I mean, sir, you're the greatest president. You're doing an unbelievable job. What a great job. Governor Moore, has anyone heard of him? Mm-hmm. He's another hopeful for president. I don't think so. But I met him, and I didn't realize it was on camera. Did you see they caught him on camera? I was at a game, I don't know, like the Army-Navy game or something, and I met him in a hallway. And as usual, you do your job very well. One of these great cameramen had it on tape. But I met this gentleman. I never met him before. Sir, you're doing a great job. You're doing an unbelievable job. Thank you very much. But then he goes on television and says, oh, Trump is a dictator. He's a dictator. And a lot of people have so the line is that I'm a dictator, but I stop crime. So a lot of people say, you know, if that's the case, I'd rather have a dictator. But I'm not a dictator. I just know how to stop crime. And you would think that Illinois would have such a problem with crime, such a bad governor. He should be calling me, and he should be saying, could you send over the troops, please? It's out of control. It's out of control. In New York, it's out of control. Not as bad as Illinois, by the way. Not even close.
All right, let's go ahead and bring in Matt Gorman. He's vice president at Targeted Victory, also former senior advisor to Senator Tim Scott, and Yemisi Egbawole, former chief of staff and advisor to the Biden White House press office, also founder of Podium Strategies. Thanks to you both for being here with us. So, Yemisi, this reporting in Politico today essentially lays out this case that what President Trump has been trying to do, or the whole point of the crime crackdown, in addition to making people feel safer, is to put Democrats on defense and try and get at least some folks to insist that crime is really not so bad.
Well, we were completely underwater during the Biden administration when it came to confidence in how we handled crime. And a lot of that comes from not addressing it. And I disagree with the woman who spoke at that DNC meeting when she said, don't take the bait. The fact of the matter is we're listening to a lot of Democrats in deep blue cities. And while they may want to gloss over this issue, there are people who live all across the nation that we're going to need come 2026, come 2028, that desperately care about crime. And not only that, we're doing very poor fundraising. I mean, we're at $13 million given to the RNC's $84 million. What does that say? It means that voters don't have confidence enough to even give us that money to support our candidates. The fact of the matter is crime does matter, and we have to start talking about it.
And this also has the effect, Matt, of alienating voters and making them feel like, again, politicians live in some alternate reality.
Yeah, exactly. Look, Trump has set a trap for Democrats, and it's the same playbook yet again that they fell into on the economy during the Biden administration, during immigration during the Biden administration, where they say that there really isn't a problem. They deny reality, and it isn't until something is so overwhelming that they can't deny it anymore they finally recognize it. It's like Wile E. Coyote, where they're already over the cliff and they realize there's nothing underneath them. And so they've set up this contrast where you're exactly right. They think of migrant crime or addressing crime as quote unquote bait. No, it's a huge factor in people's votes. And if you deny that reality, you trot out charts or stats that tell people what you're feeling isn't real, voters will just tune you out.
Take a listen to John Kasich. He's been a significant critic of the president. He was responding to all of this hullabaloo today.
They talk about a manufactured crisis. Have you been in Chicago? Have you been in Baltimore? Look, my daughter went to school in Chicago. I remember the day she graduated, there were shootings and killings right outside of her building. And in Baltimore, I have friends that go down to Johns Hopkins, get treated for medical conditions. I mean, they are nervous about ever going there.
I mean, to your point, Yemisi, nobody ever wants to talk about this stuff. It's painful, it's uncomfortable, it's, a stain on some of these major cities in the United States.
Yes, we have to remember that politics is personal. And so when we say things like crime doesn't matter, it erases the stories of those who have been affected. And it's deeply concerning, especially for a centrist base that is really becoming the silent majority in the Democratic Party. I know they used to say that Trump's MAGA folks were the silent majority, but now really centrists and those who are just in the middle of the Democratic Party are the silent majority, and they very much care. And it's showing in our fundraising numbers.
Yeah. Matt, another big item in that cabinet meeting today was the president saying the death penalty is coming for convicted murderers here in Washington, D.C. What do you think about that?
I think that's smart. Again, there's obviously unique leverage that Trump can use in D.C. that he can't in, say, other cities. But certainly, Biden really did a number on weakening the death penalty nationwide and at a federal level. Bringing that back is a good crime deterrent. Again, Trump's putting these guys on defense, the Democrats on defense. They need to respond.
A lot of Democrats obviously disagree. They say the death penalty is not actually serve as a deterrent to criminals.
Well, I think that Democrats really have to go local when it comes to going in the weeds on different subsections when it comes to crime. I mean, if it works for your state and it works for your district to message hard against the death penalty, you should do so. I mean, I couldn't see somebody like a Zohran Mamdani in New York City going hard for against the death penalty. But if you do live in more rural areas and the suburban areas, I do think you have to kind of listen to the conversation on this.
I want to ask both of you before I let you go real quick, because you both spend time in the district. Over the last couple of weeks, have you felt safer with the National Guard presence?
Notably safer. That it's a deterrent. Having that presence is a massive deterrent. I moved out partly because of crime and the cost of living just last year from a neighborhood right nearby. It feels different to me.
I do think there are some hot spots that I'm still waiting to see maybe some more increased activity from a local law enforcement or National Guard presence. I don't think National Guard needs to hang out by the Lincoln Memorial. Let's look more in maybe Chinatown, maybe some areas of but even like areas of Chinatown and Shaw that do get a lot of tourists and a lot of foot traffic and aren't maybe seeing some of that as well.
All right, guys, great to chat with you. Yemisi and Matt, thanks for coming in today.
Let's bring in P. Ray Easley, a Chicago resident. P. Ray, glad to have you on the show. So you hear President Trump saying, listen, he's willing to go in and help Chicago the same way he helped D.C., but he's getting pushback from the governor, Pritzker, and Mayor Brandon Johnson. And now he's saying, well, maybe if they don't want my help, we don't give them help. Why wouldn't they want someone to come in and help this problem be solved?
Because obviously they're benefiting from the chaos. Think about it. Our governor has been in charge for a while. Our mayor has a platform that puts the migrants before the American people. He's doing exactly what he said he was going to do on his campaign website. And because they're failing the American people, we deserve help. We don't have to live like this. And if President Trump wants to come with troops and prosecutors, because we want just as many indictments as there are arrests, then that's what we want. Don't listen to J.B. Pritzker. Don't listen to Brandon Johnson. We asked Brandon Johnson to give us the ability to vote on whether or not we were going to remain a sanctuary city, and they deaded that in the city council because this is their plan. It seems like they want to bankrupt the American taxpayers in order to force us to pay for our replacements. And we say absolutely not.
Certainly something going on. I want to put this up because I think it's very instructive. This is not just the shootings in Chicago over the weekend, but it's kind of a timeline, P. Ray, and I want to get your comments on this. We gave the times here, and some of these shootings, there are 26 of them in all, are 4 minutes apart. Some are 16, 17 minutes apart in some of the same old areas. I mean, you look at these numbers, you have the mayor and the governor keep saying Chicago is fine, but you say different, and the numbers say different.
Every number is a bad number. Right now, the city of Chicago is touting the lower crime by saying that we're at the same rates we were at in 2014. In 2014, my first cousin, Abraham Cooper, was murdered in the city of Chicago, an Operation Legend that President Trump sent to the city during the last administration solved that crime. Each person that dies is a grieving family. No grieving families are acceptable. So for them to say, well, we don't need help because violence is down, because murders are down, people are still being hurt, people are still being murdered, drugs are still being sold, humans are still being trafficked. So what is the baseline? And their baseline is confusion, and we want safety. So thank you, President Trump. We can't wait to see you. Please don't listen to them, but we're also asking you for protection, because yesterday our governor did a press conference and he said that they are taking the names and making a list of people who support the president. So I'm asking the president and everybody in America to pray for our safety and security as we fight to get justice in our city.
You say that each family that has some kind of a victim is devastated. Now, I want to put this in context for you. This is a Fox News op-ed by Douglas McKinnon talking about Chicago's crime crisis. He says Chicago's crime crisis, national disgrace. Trump must step in now. It goes on, 40,000 men, women, and children murdered in just one American city. Again, that is not a statistic. It is a killed in action report from a foreign war. As the Chicago Sun-Times once reported, the risk of a man 18 to 29 years old dying in a shooting in the most violent zip code in Chicago was higher than the death rate for U.S. soldiers in the Afghanistan war. That is pretty sobering right there, P. Ray.
Correct. My cousins were killed in that zip code. That's what I'm saying to America. This is my real life. I've lost an uncle to Chicago crime. I've lost 2 first cousins to Chicago crime. I've lost distant family members, friends, neighbors. And what they want us to do is find comfort in this chaos and normalize this trauma. And we're not doing it anymore. We don't have to do this, guys. We are American people. But if we get rid of the problem, then those who are being paid right now to solve the problem won't be paid anymore. And that's why we need our president to come here right now and do a forensic audit to find out who's getting paid and who's benefiting from this crime, because right now we're grieving.
You know, we equate this a lot to the border crisis, where the Democrats for 4 years told us there was no solution. You had to have legislation. That was the only way to shut down the border. Trump did it on day one. Kind of the same here. They're saying there's no solution. We're working at it. Is it embarrassment? Are they embarrassed, Johnson and Pritzker?
Yes.
What's your takeaway of this, P. Ray?
I think that they're very embarrassed. I think that they thought that we weren't going to be successful in our quest to get federal help. And now that it's here, everybody's going, uh-oh. But I want everybody to remember that everyone who is telling our president not to come to the city of Chicago has had a chance to make a solution in the legislative body. These people are not celebrities. These are paid representatives to the government, and this is their job to come up with the solutions. Obviously, the solutions that they're choosing aren't working, and we have to move on to a different body of government. It's quite simple. I don't understand why anybody would be for making the streets less safe. We want to get this cartel out of here. We know that the heroin highway runs directly through the west side of Chicago, and they are trafficking $2 billion worth of heroin a year out of our community. Imagine what that looks like, America. That looks like overdosing. That looks like violence. That looks like people leaning. That looks like people rocking. That looks like people dying. We don't want to live like this. They're trafficking guns. They're trafficking humans. It's crazy. So thank you, President Trump, for caring about the safety and security of the people on the west side of Chicago, and we can't wait until you get here. You're about to get a king's welcome.
It looks a lot like Medellin, Colombia, 1992. P. Ray, thank you for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
All right, welcome back. A 3-hour and 15-minute long marathon cabinet meeting led by President Trump, of course, just wrapped. It included more than 45 minutes of reporter questions and answers. Just wrapping up at the White House a moment ago, DHS Secretary Kristi Noem was in the room for the whole thing. She joins us now with her take on everything. I mean, we can't ask you to comment on everything because we would be here for like the next 3 days. But what was your biggest takeaway, Madam Secretary?
You know, the focus of the cabinet meeting was really about Labor Day and the fact that every one of President Trump's policies is benefiting Americans, that not only are they safer, is crime getting under control, are we deporting illegal criminals and bringing them to justice, but also the economy is getting better. People are making more in wages, that they're having the ability to provide for their families better. So the statistics were just astounding what President Trump has been able to deliver for just the American people and the average worker each and every day.
So President Trump's been talking about the possibility of sending in the National Guard to the city of Chicago next. The mayor was asked what he thinks about that plan. Take a quick listen.
They don't care about solutions to gun violence or homelessness or immigration. They just don't want to see it. They don't want our communities to be safer for all of us. They just want to play on people's fears and anxieties to seize more power for themselves.
That's the mayor talking about you, Madam Secretary, the president, and your colleagues in the cabinet.
You know, during the cabinet meeting, the president spoke specifically about how low the approval ratings are for that mayor in the city of Chicago, that his own people don't support him or what he's saying because he cares only about politics. He doesn't care about their safety. So that's what I think is so remarkable about what's going on right now in this country with Democrats opposing crime prevention. They literally are fighting President Trump, who is just trying to keep their people safe. So President Trump reiterated today over and over again throughout the cabinet meeting that he will keep America safe, that he will continue to do what he needs to do in these cities that are overridden with criminals and terrorists and people who are harming those citizens that live there. He's going to go there and help them keep as safe as he possibly can, and he's going to do everything he can to fight these liberal, socialist, terrible leaders that are in these cities that are harming their individuals.
A lot of folks in D.C. are, as you well know, not supportive of the deployment of the National Guard. But, Madam Secretary, even among Washingtonians who are supportive and appreciate the Guard's presence here, I have spoken to folks a lot of folks, candidly, who say they're not deployed in the right spots. They're going to the monuments, they're going to places that are perfectly safe. Meanwhile, you know, Ward 7 and 8 that are overrun by crime are still suffering. What do you say to that?
Well, Jillian, this city is completely different than it was just 13 days ago. What President Trump has been absolutely remarkable, and he's not planning on going anywhere. So those communities that are noticing a difference, they're going to be transformed by the fact that we have individuals here in law enforcement that are allowed to do their jobs for the first time. President Trump spoke today about how much we're enjoying partnering with local law enforcement, that those officers that are out in the streets are amazing human beings who just want to be able to protect those communities. So we need the mayor of D.C. to step up, to start doing her job and working with the president to do all that we can to make sure that these cities' streets become safe and continue to build on the success we've had there. But also use that to go from city to city across this country and pressure these politicians to get on board with keeping their people safe. What is going to be the story here in Washington can happen in Chicago, can happen in Boston, can happen in San Francisco. I told the president the other day, I said, listen, people in D.C. are finally remembering what it feels like to be free. They've walked around scared and terrified and not when worried about what they're going to do and how they're going to get from place to place and keep their families safe, that they forgot what it was like to live without that darkness hovering over them all the time. The last 12 to 13 days, they're remembering now what it can feel like to go to a park and play, what it can feel like to walk down the street and not have to worry that somebody's going to attack you or harm you. And so that feeling will be proliferated throughout this country as more and more of these communities become safer from President Trump's leadership.
And before I let you go, what happens the day, the week, the month after the Guard leaves? And crime in the streets in Washington, D.C. kind of comes roaring back. What's the plan then?
Well, President Trump has said that he's going to continue to use his emergency powers to do what he needs to do to keep people safe. But I think the people here will speak. The individuals that are in leadership positions in this city will start to listen to the families that live here and recognize that they need to make different decisions in the future. They need to start working with President Trump and working with all of us to make sure that these criminals are brought to justice and that their crimes are stopped. Overwhelmingly, the public is behind what President Trump is doing. And we're hoping that if these leaders can't get on board, then we need new leadership, and we'll make sure that we get them, because that's exactly what D.C. deserves. It's what every single citizen deserves in this country.
Madam Secretary, want to be cognizant of your time. Thank you so much for stepping right out of that 3-hour-plus meeting to join us. It's wonderful to talk to you as always.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day.
Let's go ahead and now bring Fox News political analyst Jono Caldwell. His 18-year-old brother, we all well know Christian, was shot and killed in Chicago just over 3 years ago. Still no arrests in that case. Jono is also the author of The Day My Brother Died and founder of the Caldwell Institute for Public Safety. He joins me now, as does Danielle Carter-Walters, vice president of Chicago Flips Red. So you guys both are eyes and ears on the ground in the city. Jono, do you agree that Trump sending the National Guard into Chicago potentially signals to Black Americans they are a problem?
Absolutely not. That's asinine commentary that we heard. Just imagine being a family member who lost not one family member, but multiple, which is the reality of many people that live in the city of Chicago. It is insane to think that the policies like the Safety Act, which eliminate cash bail, is making Chicago safer. It's also another factor that the mayor has refused to mention is the clearance rate is abysmal. For the people who are being murdered in the city of Chicago, they're getting no justice. So I would argue that families that are there who've suffered through this crime crisis are saying, yes, bring whatever resources and help you can bring, Mr. President. And that's exactly what I'm saying today as well. My brother will not die in vain. We're going to get this problem straight. But we need people with guts, politicians like Donald Trump, that say enough is enough. Here's a solution. Let's see if it works.
Well, that, Danielle, is certainly not what Mayor Johnson is saying. He was pressed about whether he would accept more police funding earlier today. Take a listen.
Would you also like to get federal funding to help put 5,000 more cops on the street in Chicago?
Well, look, policing by itself is not the full strategy.
No, I understand that, but I'm asking also, would 5,000 more police officers on the street in Chicago be helpful?
I believe the city of Chicago and cities across America would be safer if we actually had, affordable housing. Look,
okay,
I'm not saying that we don't.
That's not the question I asked.
Have you ever heard of a mayor turning down the prospect of federal funding before?
Well, he said affordable housing. Let's just be clear about that. Only 30 to 40% of those units will be affordable. And the Chicago residents, they're going to have credit checks and things. The only people that would benefit from that is illegal aliens, because they don't need that. And we know that he spent $600 million, and we believe it's more, on them. So if he would have used that money and funded more police officers and hired more police officers and gave them back their powers, then we would be safe. We know that he's a defund the police mayor, and we know that he wants to have social workers in place of the CPD. So we understand that. Look, the problem is this. I'm born and raised on the south side of Chicago. We can't even sit in our cars without worrying about a gun being put to our heads and being carjacked and robbed. We don't even stop at red lights. They run the red lights. I run red lights because you know that if you're sitting at a red light, it's a chance that a car will pull on the side of you and put guns in your head. And they're jumping out by 3 with guns in your head. So if you are armed, you can't do anything about it. The residents, we understand that if we leave our house, we know it's a chance that we're not coming back home to our loved ones. This is what we do every day, and we understand when we get up in the morning and leave our homes. So for this mayor to be that insensitive and say these things, I think he needs to go to jail for treason.
Well, Jono, the governor told National Guard troops not to come. Take a listen.
As Donald Trump looked at the assembled cameras and asked for me personally to say, Mr. President, can you do us the honor of protecting our city? Instead, I say, Mr. President, do not come to Chicago. You are neither wanted here nor needed here.
Well, we know the last time a Democratic official told folks not to come was Kamala Harris talking to illegal immigrants, and we know how that panned out.
Exactly right. And the fact of the matter is, J.B. Pritzker is only concerned about running for president at this time. He's not concerned about the people of Illinois. He's never been concerned about the people of Illinois. He is a failed politician who's willing to do whatever the far left tells him to do. That includes eliminating cash bail. That includes being supportive of some of Johnson's policies, like the no chase policy, where police officers cannot pursue a suspect without calling their supervisor. They need to make this stuff come to an end and support the police and let them do their jobs.
Jono, Danielle, thanks as always for taking time to talk to us. Great hearing from both of you. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You bet. Trump and Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker are going at it. This about threats to send the National Guard to Chicago next. Pritzker saying, quote, "Mr. President, do not come to Chicago." The president responding today. Listen.
Chicago is the worst. These places are really bad. I'm such a bad governor. He should be calling me, and he should be saying, could you send over the troops, please? It's out of control.
Senior correspondent Mike Tobin reports live from Chicago this afternoon for us. Hey, Mike.
And Jillian, Chicago's Mayor Brandon Johnson wants to call the potential deployment of National Guard a military occupation of Chicago, and he wants to use a big public dust-up as an opportunity to plead for more federal money. One of the points that Johnson keeps making is that crime is down in the city of Chicago, and technically that is accurate. Murder, shootings, vehicle theft are all down to the tune of about 30%.
The city of Chicago is not calling for the occupation of our city. Here's a better question. What should President Trump and the federal government do to ensure that the success that we are having continues? That's what we're asking the federal government, to actually invest in our cities.
What Johnson leaves out is that violent crime is down from a dramatic high. Last year, Chicago was a homicide capital of the nation with 573 murders. The homicide rate triples Los Angeles and quadruples New York City. As far as people who live and operate in the violent parts of town, some agree with the mayor. Others say bring on the Guard, any manpower that will make the streets safe.
Bringing the National Guard to Chicago is not a solution. It is an attack. It sends a message that black communities are problems to be controlled rather than people who need to be supported.
I've lost distant family members, friends, neighbors, and what they want us to do is find comfort in this chaos and normalize this trauma. And we're not doing it anymore. And that's why we need our president to come here right now and do a forensic audit to find out who's getting paid and who's benefiting from this crime, because right now we're grieving.
Now, a contributor to the violence is the fact that the big street gangs no longer have strong central leadership. Fueled by drug money, these gangs have broken up into dozens and dozens of cliques. It is not uncommon to have a gang, say the Gangster Disciples, a clique from within that gang fighting another clique from within the Gangster Disciples, and that erupts into gunfire. Jillian?
All right, Mike Tobin in Chicago for us. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Katie Pavlich, along with Harold Ford Jr., Jesse Waters, Dana Perino, and Tyrus. It's 5 o'clock in New York City, and this is The Five.
You have not had this happen for 4 years. You sat and you'd ask one question to Biden, and it was always the ice cream question, right? What flavor ice cream do you like best? I like vanilla. And that was the end of the conference.
President Trump holding a marathon cabinet meeting that stretched past 3 hours, covering just about every major issue facing Americans at home and abroad. At the center of it all, crime. 47 was touting his incredible turnaround of Washington, D.C. from one of America's most dangerous cities to what he now calls the safest city in the nation. And in classic Trump fashion, he pointed out the awkward reality for Democrats. They're defending crime instead of fighting it.
And we are the party, the Republicans are the party that wants to stop crime. We're against crime. The Democrats like crime. I don't know why. I think crime will be the big subject of the midterms and will be the big subject of the next election. They called it a trap. This Democrat consultant, they said, he's put him in a trap again. Because these are all traps. You know, 80-20, but they're not 80-20. They're almost 100 to nothing.
And just as the president predicted, the left is falling for it. As Politico noted this morning, on crime, Trump has Democrats right where he wants them. Case in point, Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson repeatedly dodged Morning Joe's questions on whether an increased police presence would help out with violence in the Windy City.
Would you also like to get federal funding to help put 5,000 more cops on the street in Chicago?
Policing by itself is not the full strategy.
Do you believe that the streets of Chicago would be safer if there were more uniformed police officers on the streets of Chicago?
I believe the city of Chicago and cities across America would be safer if we actually had, affordable housing. Look,
Okay,
I'm not saying that we
that's not
don't.
the question I asked. My question is, and I just need a yes or a no, would an additional 5,000 cops on the streets in Chicago help complement those programs to make Chicago safer?
I don't believe that just simply putting out an arbitrary number around police officers is the answer.
All right, Dana, I actually agree with the mayor in the sense that policing is not the only thing you need. You also need prosecution and tough on crime policies and laws in cities across the country to actually keep people off the streets and from getting out if they commit a crime. But it seems like to me the Democrats and these mayors have gone so far off the deep end with the defund the police movement that they can't now come back to saying and admitting that actually not having police officers really has been detrimental.
Brandon Johnson in Chicago in particular, but Muriel Bowser in D.C. a little bit different, right? She has said we need to add, I think it's 300 police officers. She's asking and hoping for more recruits. And so and that's why initially, even with her in D.C., it was like, we don't really love this, but it could help. And then she's had to deal with her constituents and gone on to a little bit to the left. But in general, it's like she knows that this can give them some breathing space in order to get some things calmed down. But in the meantime, you have Brandon Johnson. This guy's more recently has done better, but about 2 months ago, he had a 7% approval rating in all of Chicago. Okay, and it's mostly a Democrat city. So that means your mom and maybe your aunt still like you, and that's it. What was so painful about the interview that Joe Scarborough did with him is that he's clearly trying to give him a lifeline. He's trying to lead the witness. He's like, don't you think that more police would help? And he's like, no, but don't you think? And even Brandon Johnson didn't want to take that because he thought that Joe Scarborough was trying to put him in a trap.
Yeah.
And so now you're going to have Democrats all across the country have to defend this. And that is one, on the merits, good. Let's have this debate. Let's figure out a way to get America's cities more safe. But also then on the politics. Karl Rove was on Newsroom today saying that if you go back, and Harold maybe could talk about this, that when Bill Clinton realized that the 1996 was going to be a bad election year, what did he do? Figured out a way to do the crime bill, add more cops, and get the federal government to pay for it. And he was able to win.
So, Tyrus, one of the big problems Democrats have, besides defending crime, is that President Trump made a campaign promise to clean up D.C., and now other people in these cities are saying, why can't we do that in our city? Why are our leaders failing us? They combined it with policy and execution, which is resulting in results. I mean, there are thousands of arrests happening in D.C., so it's not just like they've said this and they hope people like it. It's actually actionable.
Well, you keep going to, I always try to look at the other side's perspective, and you try to figure out what is their argument, even when I made a little chart. You just, the pros and cons. There's no pros to their argument. We had 4 years of lawlessness in our big cities to where they're emboldened, they're attracted, they form groups, they use Facebook to map out where they're going to go. So, and the police are underfunded, and they went through 4 years of hell. So the only reasonable way to fix this is to bring in extra help, which is in this case, our military. And we've seen amazing results, not just that they're there, but the presence is there. Now the guys, when they're in the house going, hey, which Walmart are we going to knock off? I don't know, man. There's soldiers everywhere. I'm not going out tonight. It's a deterrent, and it's working. And my argument is, since you try to figure out what is the profit, what is the benefit of speaking out against this? Whom is going to vote for you or support you or send you money in your campaign for saying I'm anti everything they're doing? So the best way to win this argument, there's only one way. What Mayor Johnson has to do is they like to do challenges. They always want to do bench press challenges. And here's a challenge for you. Switch with one of your constituents in these rough neighborhoods without your team. All you get is a little chest camera, and that's it. And you live in that apartment for 7 days with no staff, no bodyguards, nothing, and a small allowance, $100, and you figure it out for a week. Yeah. See how long and then when you come out of that, and if you can look that camera in the face, like, yeah, we don't need help in our cities, then maybe you could have an argument, and I could add that to the list.
But you have to add kids that you have to send to school.
Yes.
Yeah.
To that
and
scenario,
to
because that's a huge problem.
And to play in parks and to walk down the street by themselves. And not to do what the governor of Illinois just did, which is to go to a place with bodyguards in the safest part of Chicago.
And film the water.
Ignoring it. Exactly.
Water crimes are not running out of order. That's where the crimes are happening.
So, Harold, it seems like politically, Democrats could disarm Republicans by working with the president on these issues and solve some crime in their cities, get an accomplishment, and then take away the accusation that Democrats are pro-crime. But at the DNC summer meeting where they're trying to start over, you have this woman who's a consultant saying that this is an issue that affects Americans, and simply it's just an issue that is a red herring, essentially, that Republicans are pouncing on for Democrats rather than reality.
Good to be back around the table. A couple of things. First, it's been duly noted by Karl Rove and I think many others. We've said it on this show. The last time we had a national crime bill that actually went after fighting crime and put more cops on the street, introduced community policing, expanded it, helped provide more prosecutors around the country to prosecute violent criminals, it was Bill Clinton, a Democratic president. I don't think of this as a Democrat-Republican, but if we're going to go down the narrative and use some of the vernacular, I'm happy to do it. Democrats. This may not be the issue that the 26 elections are decided upon. Many people always say it's the economy, but I tell you, we're walking right into not only a trap, but as I said yesterday, we swing at every pitch outside of the strike zone. Crime is an issue in cities, in rural areas all across this country, whether it be drugs infiltrating communities, whether it be guns infiltrating communities, and the violence that spews from that or that flows from that. The mayor of D.C., who I think is doing a pretty decent job, said, look, we need more money for jails. We need more money for mental health, as I've heard the mayor here in New York and other cities across the country. I thought my pal Joe Scarborough tried to give the mayor of Chicago a lifeline. There's nothing wrong with saying you need more police officers. You could say, yes, we want more police officers to help us with mental health issues who are trained in that way. We want police officers who can help us break up domestic violence disturbances. As Tyra said yesterday, fundamentally, any city in America, if you're a leader there, you want crime reduced so you can induce more investment, more jobs, more opportunities, new things, new education opportunities come into communities. This is why this is important. But I would urge President Trump, I get it. Sending the military might be the thing to do, but do a crime bill. You have Republicans. Katie, you said Democrats should go to them. Republicans control the House and the Senate. When they get back off recess, Speaker Johnson, put together a massive, smart, comprehensive crime bill, and you'll get Democrats like me on television saying, Democrats, support it.
So, Jesse, this is not just a narrative or the vernacular. You have these Democratic mayors speaking out against the president. They're not willing to involve themselves in turning over illegal immigrants to ICE, for example, which are a big part of these arrests. And at the DNC, again, they're not willing to admit that they were wrong. And the mayor of D.C., to her credit now, has moderated a little bit on this, but she's actually the reason why the police department is short thousands of cops and they're trying to pay $30,000 for bonuses, because she was part of this narrative in 2020 that defund the police was an option that would make communities safer.
Well, over 90% of the black victims of shootings are black. I didn't say that correctly, but you get the point. This is something that Trump is saying Black Lives Matter, and Democrats are saying, no, they don't. So he's trying to protect black lives, and he's going to win black votes because of this. It's the same thing with illegal immigration. He went out and tried to secure the border, and the Democratic Party thought Hispanics were going to recoil, and they didn't. They voted for Trump. And the same thing's happening here. Black people want safe neighborhoods. Hispanic Americans want secure borders. It's not that difficult for the Democrats to understand. You asked Harold Ford Jr. the right question. If you can't beat them, join them. Why don't they just join with the president to make sure the country is safe? It's not that complicated. They hold a losing hand, Katie, and it's killing them politically, and it's also killing black Americans. So do the right thing. The Democratic Party has to be more nationalist. They have to want to build ships. They have to want to build AI centers. They have to want to do what's right for the country. And if you have someone going after Jerome Powell because he's keeping rates high and people are locked out of homes and you can't have the American dream, why don't they jawbone Powell too? so he brings rates down so we can get this party going again. Everybody knows someone who's been pickpocketed, carjacked. Maybe it happened to them personally. And all these things have happened in the inner city. And if you go out and tell these people, crime's down, and throw a statistic in their face, well, I just got shot in the abdomen, and you're giving me a statistic, you're not taking me seriously. And we have to take everything the politicians say so seriously. You know, their work got broken into on January 6th. Oh, my God, we heard about it for 2 years. 0.1% of the population is trying to figure out what bathroom to go to. We have to hear about that nonstop. Redistricting was 3 weeks. Yep. No one even cares about that. All right, so we have to pay attention to your shenanigans, but people are getting shot in the leg. People are dying from fentanyl because the heroin highway comes right through Chicago, and they're saying, don't worry about it, and throwing numbers at you that they cooked because they're cooking the books. Trump's not laying a trap. He's just doing the right thing. Democrats should try that sometime.
Katie, I wasn't being critical of you when I said the narrative. I only meant if
That's
the
okay.
president. If I'm going to be critical, I'll be frontal critical. The Republicans, Mr. Trump ought to just get them to pass something in Congress too, because as you know, in D.C. he can do all of this.
I don't disagree with
and
that.
I think the Democrats are wrong. Any Democrat that does a Democratic mayor doesn't want more cops. Shame on you.
Well, it's really difficult to run over with the hose on the police situation when a lot of the Democrats are the ones who built this problem by saying all cops are racist and they should be defunded. So they don't really want to admit that they were wrong.
I didn't say that.
That's what I said. All right, up next, are the Democrats about to go the way of the dinosaurs?
Good afternoon, and live from Texas, this is the Will Cain Show. A cabinet meeting this morning with a mission: crime. As is custom for the president, today's meeting, the 7th of his second term. This cabinet meeting was wide-ranging, but the highlight from all present was the crackdown on crime in Washington, D.C.
These places are really bad. Crime in D.C. was the worst it ever was. You know, they make up stories. Crime in D.C. was the worst ever in history. And now, over the last 13 days, we've worked so hard. And we've taken so many, there are many left, but we've taken so many criminals, over 1,000.
That success President Trump is so proud of that he's now considering broadening the National Guard presence to other cities.
The line is that I'm a dictator, but I stop crime. So a lot of people say, you know, if that's the case, I'd rather have a dictator. But I'm not a dictator. I just know how to stop crime. And you would think that Illinois would have such a problem with crime, such a bad governor. He should be calling me, and he should be saying, could you send over the troops, please? It's out of control. It's out of control. In New York, it's out of control. Not as bad as Illinois, by the way. Not even close. In California, you would have not had the Olympics had I not sent in the troops.
Personal stories, hearing from the people of Washington, D.C. about their experience with crime has become some of the most important evidence, testifying to their quality of life. That testimony was heard in this meeting from a reporter.
More than 2 years ago, it was a Saturday morning in broad daylight. I was on my way to work, and a young man with a black ski mask pointed a gun at my face and threatened me to hand over my phone, my wallet, my laptop, and everything else. And when I refused, he used the butt of his handgun to strike me across the face, in the cheek, or what some people call pistol whip me, before running away. Thank you for now making DC safer for us, for our families, for my parents, on my behalf of my parents, and now my baby on the way. Thank you so much.
13 days in Washington, D.C. without a homicide. It seems like the type of statistic, the type of life that others might want across this country, in other cities. But no, not according to Chicago Democrat Mayor Brandon Johnson. In a remarkable interview, he was asked about the experience in Washington, D.C. and whether or not increased police presence could help the streets of Chicago. Watch this on MSNBC.
I'm curious, and this does come down to an ideological difference between people. Do you believe that the streets of Chicago would be safer if there were more uniformed police officers on the streets of Chicago?
I believe the city of Chicago and cities across America would be safer if we actually had, affordable housing.
Okay, so he denies in that moment of whether or not increased police presence would help. He suggests it takes a full picture: affordable housing, social workers on the street. Okay, so let's reframe the question now and go back to the mayor of Chicago.
That's not the question I asked. My question is, and I just need a yes or a no, do you believe the streets of Chicago would be safer if you got all of those other extraordinary programs put back into place, which do have a history of being successful, if that's complemented by having 5,000 more cops on the streets of Chicago?
I don't believe that we...
Okay, now you've gotten everything you want. Whether or not they actually work, social workers on the streets of Chicago, whether or not affordable housing is granted. For the sake of this question, the host on MSNBC, Joe Scarborough, says, I grant you all of your wishes, but would you also like and think it might be helpful to have 5,000 more police officers on the streets of Chicago? Let's try a third time.
Mr. Mayor, are you hearing what I'm saying? I'm agreeing with you that all of these other social programs are extraordinarily important. I just need a yes or a no, and then this will be the last time I ask. If you get all of those other social programs that 800 million that New York City does, Los Angeles, other people do with great success, would an additional 5,000 cops on the streets in Chicago help complement those programs to make Chicago safer?
Look, we are working hard to make sure that our police department is fully supported.
But he went on to deny, after nearly 4 minutes, that there's any particular number of officers that might help the crime in Chicago. Now, whether or not that's antipathy towards cops or denial of the problem in Chicago, it was either an act of incredible political amateurism or maybe political talent in the ability to filibuster and decline to answer a very simple yes or no question. Do more cops help reduce crime? We're seeing that increased law enforcement helped in Washington, D.C. Maybe, though, what the mayor of Chicago is actually suggesting is they don't have a problem in Chicago. He's saying, as many cities have said, nothing to see here in our streets. The White House says, well, that's because there's actually a lot to see, but what you let us see are some flawed stats.
We've uncovered, in the process of uncovering, a massive scandal in Washington, D.C. with the doctoring of crime stats. And the Department of Justice, under the Attorney General, is leading the effort to uncover this. But when we ultimately share the results, it will stun you. The extent to which, even though D.C. had the worst crime in America, honestly measured, it dramatically understated how bad it was. There's even accusations that murders and homicides were reported as accidents instead of murders.
That's quite a lot to claim. That would be a big deal. Fudging crime stats to suggest your streets are actually safe, when, again, the testimony you hear on personal experience to quality of life doesn't mesh with those stats. If that turns out to be the case in Washington, D.C., could it also be the case in Chicago? Could it also be the case in Los Angeles? Let's dig in. Manhattan Institute fellow and author of Criminal Injustice, Rafael Mangual, joins us now. Rafael, we have seen this idea of crime stats, quote, juked, laid out before us on, for example, the TV show The Wire. How common is it for police departments, perhaps under political pressure, to juke their stats?
I suspect it's more common than we think, right? I mean, you have obviously the political pressure, particularly in Democratic strongholds, where Democrats are consistently vulnerable to Republicans on the crime issue, and so are under a lot of pressure to be able to say that things are not actually as bad as the Republicans say they are. But there are also just the sort of natural kind of incentives in place, right? Police executives are under a lot of pressure from their bosses to deliver, to lower crime in the jurisdictions in which they control. And so when you have those kinds of incentive structures in place and you have that political pressure, it's not at all surprising that some individuals are going to inappropriately define certain crimes downward. And so this is actually one of the reasons why criminal researchers and people like myself tend to rely most heavily on really only two crime measures, and that's homicide homicides and car theft. And the main reason for that is that those are the two crime measures that are least susceptible to manipulation, right? If you have a dead body with 9 bullet holes in it, it's very hard to categorize that as an accident or a suicide. And most people, in order to collect on insurance claims, they have to file a police report. So that tends to get recorded more commonly and more accurately. But outside of those two crime statistics, there's a lot of wiggle room.
Well, you heard from Stephen Miller there that he is suggesting perhaps the research will show that even murder in Washington, D.C. was miscategorized. The stats deflated for public consumption. So let's do this together. Let's take a look at Washington, D.C. and then take a look at the crime stats in Chicago. Here's what the crime stats in Washington, D.C. say right now. Homicide down 15%, assault with a dangerous weapon 19%, robbery down 31%, motor vehicle theft down 3%. Chicago, meanwhile, is claiming over the last 4 years the crime actually went up 40%. But inside the numbers, they say murder down 50%, robbery down 11%. You can see burglary, theft, and motor vehicle theft all up. How would a police department, a city, a political entity, a mayor, and a chief of police change those stats? How would that actually work?
Well, I mean, I'll give you an example, right? So let's say you have a strong-arm robbery. So an individual walks into a convenience store, right, jumps over the counter, grabs the clerk and says, give me all the money. Maybe even doesn't display a weapon. Takes the money and runs off. Now, let's say he only gets $95. A police officer responding to that might get pressure from a sergeant or a senior officer to call that a petty larceny. To say, well, no one was hurt, no weapons were brandished. So even though technically this is a robbery, which is a violent felony and usually what's called a Part 1 crime, right, or an index felony, we're going to go ahead and categorize this as a misdemeanor, as a petty larceny, right? So, that's kind of how these things would happen, which is, why I'm not particularly convinced that this is a massive problem in the homicide space, although I'm sure when you have the marginal case that, could look like a suicide, that there might be pressure to categorize it that way. But yeah, I mean, these are things that can absolutely happen. It's one of the reasons why crime researchers have generally been, relatively skeptical of broad categories of crime statistics outside of homicides and car thefts.
Especially when it doesn't seem to mesh with what people are telling you is their experience and their quality of life in a place like Washington, D.C. That's an investigation that is needed, perhaps not just in D.C., but as well in some place like Chicago. Raphael, thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.